Today we're talking about one of the fastest ways to learn new music, and that is noticing the repetition. So if you're just starting out learning an instrument or learning to sing, then this is a really, really great exercise because it makes the music feel much more achievable and playable right at the beginning. And then if you're a more intermediate to advanced player, it's also really helpful for memorizing music, so you don't have to play with the music in front of you all the time. So I'm going to give you some exercises for beginners, and then I'm going to give you a more intermediate extension exercise using a jazz standard. And then at the end of the video, there is a relaxation exercise if you'd like to stay and have a really nice, calm, focused, lovely start to your practice for today. Strike, spark. Welcome to Practice Space. I'm Erica. I am a professional musician, composer, and a music teacher. And Practice Space is for all musicians, beginners to advanced. And we work on practical exercises like today, but we also work on creative stuff. And the whole idea about this channel is to give you something new to practice every day and also keep you inspired and motivated to practice every day. So sometimes it can be hard to find the motivation to show up to the practice room, especially when you're feeling a bit down. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to give you the push that you need to keep working on your music. So if you like, you can subscribe, hit the notification so you're notified when our new episodes are released Monday to Saturday each week. And I also teach music online, so if you'd ever like to take a lesson with me, I'll leave a link in the description. So repetition in music is kind of what makes music so magical, and it's the reason we get songs stuck in our head, because the chorus is catchy and it repeats over and over again, so we remember it really quickly and then we can't get it out. And it also creates the drama in music because we hear the repetition and then suddenly the repetition changes, something else happens, and it makes us want to know what's happening next. And the repetition is a great way of looking at learning music because it can shortcut our practice. We can really save a lot of time if we look for the repetition before we start learning something. So that's what we're looking at today. So I'll start with the beginner exercises, and these are exercises that I give to kids that I teach. And sometimes as adult beginners, we need to treat ourselves a little bit like children in the practice room. So these exercises are very valuable regardless of how old you are as a beginner. So the first exercise is for anyone learning to play melodies, so melodic material, and especially if you're learning to sight read these melodies. So you'll need some colored pencils, and you are going to firstly color in all of the notes one color. So color in all the C's one color, all the D's another color, E's another color, and so on. And then you're going to play through your colored in version and just use the colors as an extra visual hook to help you sight read that piece and know where the notes are on the music and where the notes are on your instrument. Because often having this extra color, so knowing that all those G's are a green color, you associate the green G and then the G on your instrument where you have to play it. And so you play through the music once with the colors, and then so you don't get too reliant on the colors, then you have a second version of the music with no colors and you play through it again, but it should feel a little bit more secure. You should feel a bit better about sight reading that piece because your brain has got an extra kind of layer of memory. We've been working on creating another pathway through those notes and through the sight reading. And so then the second version of this exercise for melodies is to color in any repeating phrases. So find any of the phrases in the melody that repeat and color them in the same color. And possibly, sometimes we have repetition, but the ending changes slightly. So you could color in the first half of the phrase, which is the repeated part, one color, and then have two different colors for those slightly different endings. And so my next exercise is for anyone working on chords. So perhaps you're playing from chord charts. And this is a little bit similar to this repeating idea. So you're going to color in any repeating chord progressions. So for example, if you're playing a song and it has a lot of repetition of the chord progression G, D, A minor, C perhaps, then you're going to color in every repetition of that chord progression. And then perhaps you have a second chord progression. Maybe it's the same chords, but they're in a different order, or the chords go for a little bit longer or they move quicker. Then you color that in a different color. And what you will find is you probably have maybe 50% of your song is colored in purple, and then maybe 25% is colored in green, 25% is colored in blue. And then you realize you only have 3 sections to work on when you're working on the chord changes. And I know this is sounding probably really obvious when I put it into a video like this, but we just forget to do this sometimes. We want to start at the beginning and we try and play through to the end, and we don't take that step back to begin with, just to break down the piece and work out where the sections of repetition are, so that we know that we have these 3 sections we need to work on, and then we can isolate those 3 sections and give the sections that need the most work the most time in our practice, rather than spending all the time on the first part because we keep getting stuck on the opening bars. We keep making a mistake in the same place and we never get through to the end of the song. And so then finally I have an exercise for singers, and sometimes it can be quite hard to memorize lyrics when the verses are all sort of similar, but maybe they start with the same idea but then they finish with something different. And so using colors is kind of the same way that we can use them when we're sight reading. We can use the colors just to trigger our memory. So if you have a verse of a song and it starts with the same line and then the next 3 lines of the verse are different, color in the first line the same and then designate a color to each of those verses. And I think it will really help you to remember if you designate a color that kind of matches the emotional content of the lyrics. So perhaps the first verse starts with a line and it's a bit wistful, so you decide to color that in maybe a light purple. And then the second verse starts with the same line, but then instead of being wistful, it's much more angry, so you give that the red color. And then the third verse, it starts with the same line, but the last bit is hopeful, so perhaps you color that in kind of a clear blue. And so you have your 3 colors, and this is a really nice way of adding a visual cue to help you to remember the lyrics. And so the same with the sight reading. You're going to sing with the lyric sheet with the colors, then you're going to sing with the lyric sheet without the colors, and then you take the lyric sheet away altogether and you sing with no lyrics. So this is a really great exercise if you find it hard to memorize lyrics. So if you're a more intermediate player, we're going to go deeper into this idea of repetition, and I'm going to use the jazz standard Autumn Leaves as an example. And I have a student who every time I bring out Autumn Leaves as a teaching tool, they say Autumn Leaves again, but it's just a good teaching tool and it's a great standard to work on this idea of repetition. So I'm going to sing and play the chords, and I'm going to sing without words just so we're focusing on the melody and the chords for the moment. So the opening part of Autumn Leaves goes like this. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, ya da da da. And you probably immediately noticed that very glaring repetition of that motif that is repeated but transposed down the chords. So we had ya da da da, da 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 da, the same kind of ascending melodic idea but starting lower. Da 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 da, same again. Ya da da da. So the repetition is not exactly the same each time. It follows the chord changes. And if you're learning to play a little bit of jazz, then it's a great exercise to look at the melody and how does the melody interact with the chords that are happening at that time. And so that's a bit of micro repetition. We also have a lot of macro repetition in Autumn Leaves. I'll play you the next section, the next 8 bars. Ya da da da. So far the same. Da 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 da. Ya da da da. Da 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 da. So just the last little tiny phrase is different. So if you were learning this melody, you've learned the first part, you've almost learned most of the second 8 bars, you just have to learn a slightly different part at the end. And then we have the biggest contrast, which is the bridge. Ya da 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 da, da 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 da, ya da da da, da 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 da. So this is what happens in a lot of jazz standards, is you have the B section or the bridge where it's a contrasting section and everything is changed. But there is still some repetition from the first part in the chords, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but let's just hear the end of the melody. So in the case of Autumn Leaves, we have a different section again at the end. Sometimes jazz standards have the format A, B, A, but Autumn Leaves is more like A, B, C. So the ending part goes ya da 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 da. The end. And so I was talking about the repetition in the chords, and if we actually look at the chord progression, what we find is that we have these two kind of key progressions that repeat. And the first one is this D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7. And I don't need to continue that progression because there are other chords that come after it. But that 3 chord progression is called a 2-5-1, and if you have started to look at any jazz, you probably have heard about 2-5-1s. They repeat everywhere, and Autumn Leaves, our first 2-5-1 that repeats for probably 30% of the song, is this D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So if you were learning to play the chords, then you don't actually have to start at the beginning and say, okay, just play the chords through, because there are often a lot of chords in jazz standards compared to pop songs that have more repetition. But we have this repeating 3 chord progression. So if you just work on that 3 chord progression and get it sounding really good and know all of the places on your instrument you can play that chord progression and how you can play it, then you've worked on ways of playing 30% of the song approximately. So we have a second 2-5-1, which is the 2-5-1 in A minor. So it starts on a B half diminished, and then an E7, and then an A minor. So again, a 3 chord progression. So we have another little 3 chord kind of unit that we can practice, and we can practice different ways of playing it. We can practice different inversions of the chords. We can practice playing it in different parts of our instrument. We can practice different accompaniment styles through that small piece of information, just that 2-5-1. And then once we've got those 2 sections, the D minor 7 to G7, C major 7, and then the B half diminished to E7 to A minor, that's almost the whole song. And sometimes when I work on this with students, we don't play anything else. We just play the song with those 2 2-5-1 progressions, because the rest of the chords are kind of like color. They add some spiciness. They let us move from one section to the other, but we can still get the essence of the song just by playing those 2-5-1s. And then when they feel solid, then we just add in the extra chords that fill in the gaps, and that's maybe, I don't know, 20% of the song. So we've already got the majority of the song under our fingers by working on those 2 progressions. So there are many things that repeat in Autumn Leaves, and if you're kind of curious about this idea, then you can look yourself up a chart for Autumn Leaves. So find a lead sheet for the song Autumn Leaves and have a go at finding all of the repetition, because you'll find that if you've never played jazz before and you look at the chart, it looks kind of complicated. There are more chords than a pop song, but once we break it down and we find these points of repetition, it makes it much easier to practice. And so the same for as beginners, we don't have to start right at the beginning and then just try and play through to the end, and then we make a mistake somewhere, and so we have to go back to the start again to try and correct that mistake, and we never make it through to the end with confidence. Instead, if we take a step back before we even start learning something and say, where is the repetition? Where are the repeating sections? What do I need to work on? What small chunks can I isolate to practice before bringing it together? It's just such a fast way of learning new repertoire, and it makes you feel much more confident early on because you are working on these sections, and when you go to bring it together, you're not doing that thing of starting, making a mistake, back to the beginning and feeling like you never ever get through to the end. So the key things to take from this exercise, if you're a beginner, it's really great to take some coloured pencils, and before you start learning something new, actually colour in the repetitions that you can find and give yourself those visual cues about the repeats. And then when you play the repeats, when you've played it once, you play it a second time, you don't have to think so much about the notes because you've already played them once. They're a little bit under your fingers. So you can start thinking about the tone and the expression and the phrasing, which gives you access to these more intermediate tools quicker than if you were just trying to sight read all of the notes in one go. And if you're a more intermediate student, then have a look for the hidden repetition in whatever it is you're working on. So find the motifs that repeat, perhaps melodically, but not exactly the same. Maybe there's some rhythmic ideas that repeat, but the melodies have changed. Maybe the same ideas repeat, but they're in different keys. So maybe there's a theme that happens in a major key and then it's restated in a different part of the piece in a minor key. So look for all of those hidden repetitions and see how many you can find. It's kind of fun to find all of the repetitions, and it gives you an insight into the composer who wrote that piece of music. And so try this in your practice today with whatever it is you're working on. Find those repetitions and let me know in the comments how you go. And if you found this exercise really helpful, then it would be amazing if you would give the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for daily episodes. And finally, you can stay for a very short relaxation exercise just to transition you into a nice calm space for your music practice today. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. So let's just take a few moments now to prepare the body and the mind for practice. Make your space comfortable. Take out your instrument and any books or music you need for your practice. And then when you're ready, coming to a place of stillness, either sitting or standing, maybe with your instrument. Soft focus in the eyes. And then taking deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Then another inhale, and with the exhale, closing your eyes. We're going to scan through the body from top to bottom, just watching as any tension in the body releases, melts away. Starting at the top of the body, the head, the forehead, the point between the eyebrows, the cheekbones, the lips, tongue, the neck, all the tension releasing, melting away. The shoulders, the upper back, and the chest. The upper half of each arm, the lower half of each arm, the wrists, every muscle in the hands, and in each finger, down each joint all the way to the fingertips, relaxing, releasing. Diaphragm, the lower back, the area of the pelvis, the upper half of each leg, the knees, and the lower half of each leg. Every muscle releasing, relaxing. The ankles, the feet, and finally the toes. Every muscle in the body released, relaxed, at ease. And then just sitting for a moment, taking another few breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then when you're ready, blinking the eyes open, ready for practice.